it has come to my notice that there's been quite a few videos about Jordan Peterson, and I noticed in one of the comments somebody asking, "Is he dead?" And I must say, I thought he might be, but I think all this spate of Jordan Peterson videos was caused by his daughter Michaela Peterson talking about her father as if he was on his last legs. So I don't know the situation. I suppose it's the nature of being a YouTuber that you kind of you're a kind of surfer and you ride a wave and you think you might come to the attention of viewers if you discuss what's hot and happening. I do have a few things to say about Jordan Peterson, and I thought I'd say it now. Well, I'm riding this wave. Let's be frank, I do these things too, but I hope not gratuitously. So, Jordan Peterson has been. Uh, is he regarded always as a saint or not? A kind of Protestant pope, a sacrifice for social conservatism. I don't know. It seems that he is prepared to take on the establishment, but I've always found that at the very last minute he gives way. He instead of saying, "So what? This is exactly what I think," and facts and logic prevent me from resigning from my position. So his interviews with Kathy Newman, when they were talking about feminism, suggest that he should have stood his ground rather than try to get out of the situation and pretend he wasn't taking a position against feminism, because feminism is really our current political orthodoxy. And I am saying it ought to be challenged because it is harmful both to women and men, and ultimately to society, to the long term national interest. And posterity will have a few words to say about our, our reluctance to call it out, because so many of us are, I guess, beneficiaries of the culture of casual sex. We kind of like it that way, but we sort of feel uneasy that it might not be a good thing, but we don't really want to admit it in the face of, I guess, fundamentalist Christians or radical Muslims and people like that. But it is certainly high time that we had an honest and rational discussion about these things without good reason retreating from our position, as I perceive Jordan Peterson to have done. His greatest failing, in my view, was his reluctance to express to sorry, I'm scrolling up and down and I'm not concentrating properly. His reluctance to say whether or not he believed in God. And this is, in a way, a very fruitful ground for discourse. Because if he did believe in God, then he would not be resigning from his positions that he took in favour of social conservatism and in opposition to feminism. But it seems he did not really believe. He only wished that feminism wasn't quite such a problem. Without vigorously defending his position. Now, I am trying to find on Wikipedia what I saw earlier. that I was going to discuss. Well, I know he gave a series of lectures on the Bible, which is, well, that's inappropriate if he wasn't even Christian, if he didn't even believe in God, let alone believe that Jesus is God. So this is fundamentally the weakness of Western conservatism, of Western social conservatism, because you can't really defend it if you're not prepared to go the whole hog. I'm sorry, I can't find that bit, but I will be able to find it through looking up atheism, his position as an atheist, because really he refused to say whether he believed in God, and he was saying it was a personal question, and his prevarication has not particularly helped him. So in May 2025, Peterson engaged in a debate with 20 atheists that was hosted by Jubilee Media and was originally titled One Christian versus 20 Atheists. However, during the debate, which went viral on social media, Peterson refused to identify as a Christian and was evasive about his religious beliefs. This came as a surprise to the atheists he was debating, who had specifically been invited to the show to debate a Christian. Shortly after release, the title was changed to Jordan Peterson versus 20 Atheists. You see, these prevarications are fundamentally fatal to your entire political position if you won't defend them. It's not exactly to the death, is it? You're really saying you have these convictions and you believe them to be true, which is the whole point of saying you have convictions. And now we see on this Wikipedia entry that Peterson grew up in a mildly Christian household. Mildly Christian? So he's a cultural Christian, which is most Westerners. They don't take it literally. They don't take the Trinity literally. And this is obviously a weak point that Muslims have noticed, because if you're not going to defend the fundamentals of your belief, then it does suggest that you don't really believe in it. And if Jordan Peterson is a kind of pope of social conservatism for Protestants and ultimately Western men, then it is a problem. So under the heading of religion in Wikipedia, it says, in a 2017 interview, Peterson was asked if he was Christian. He responded, "I suppose the most straightforward answer to that is yes." When asked if he believes in God, Peterson responded, "I think the proper response to that is no, but I'm afraid he might exist." That's a nonsensical response, isn't it? He doesn't believe in God, but he fears God might exist. Well, that's not that's not exactly a statement of faith, is it? In a podcast with Douglas Murray and Jonathan Pajot, Peterson stated that God is the, quote, ultimate fictional character, unquote, which is, quote, at the top of the hierarchy of attention and action. That's pretty nonsensical. Or the second half of the quote is pretty much nonsensical, saying God is the ultimate fictional character, which is at the top of the hierarchy of attention and action. What does he mean by that? I'll try to steelman his position. So God is at the top of the hierarchy of attention and action, if he exists. So Peterson can be supposed to be wondering, well, if he exists, I'm in trouble, because he did say earlier that I'm afraid God might exist. And if he, so it's kind of like Pascal's wager, isn't it? Pascal said, God might exist, and if he does, you're in deep trouble if you don't believe in him, because if you don't believe in him, you won't obey his laws, and if you don't obey his laws, you're going to end up in hell. So why not believe in God, just to be on the safe side? Because if you do believe in God, this seems to be what society and government requires, and this is what is going to protect you from your evil inclination and your desire to do ungodly things. So you might as well believe in God. And this is easy in a time when most people did believe in God, or when the government tried to instill a general belief in God. But over the centuries, this government policy has gone by the wayside, because in the last 250 years, the actual religion of the West is really liberalism and not Christianity. But let's go back to what convinces me that Peterson is in fact atheist. As well as all the other things that he has said, his sort of mealy mouth pronouncements of if God exists and that sort of thing, which suggests that he doesn't have a firm conviction. But then to have firm convictions would lay you open to accusations of extremism and radicalism and fundamentalism, which I guess he wished to avoid. But what I'm trying to say is that the most revealing thing Peterson said about God is that he called him the ultimate fictional character. And these three words condemn him as an atheist. We don't know now exactly what he believes in, but if he's going on like that, if he's prevaricating to his viewers and the people who read his books, then, well, it's not really good enough, is it? And what keeps striking me about his position is that, well, he could say that he's agnostic. I say I'm agnostic, but that doesn't change my position on the utility of religion, which has three main purposes. For the purpose of spirituality, if all you care about is getting to heaven, and for political purposes, if you want to be, if you're in government and want people to, pay attention to what you say, believe in you to mean what you say because you say you believe in God, and the social purpose of ensuring that most people in your society say they believe in a particular belief system, which includes God. And why not? because if we didn't believe in God, then all we're left with is the most powerful man alive, or the most powerful country alive, the most powerful empire around. And even these are mortal and fallible. And we know from a long list of extinct empires that imperialists don't really know what's good for them. We know that the Spanish Empire ended because the Spanish just couldn't stop themselves from bankrupting themselves by supporting all kinds of religious wars. An example would be the Spanish Armada against England in the Middle Ages, and other ones too. And we know that the 20th century was not a good time for the Spanish, who had a civil war, and this rocked the Spanish monarchy until they have become this rather insignificant thing. In fact, the Spanish monarchy is the only other Catholic monarchy in Europe, the other one being Little Belgium. So we have to really come to terms with the fact that absolute monarchy is now extinct. What supported it, Christianity, is therefore an anachronism. I call it an anachronism because we don't really want absolute monarchy, and therefore we don't really need Christianity to support absolute monarchy. And if we're going to be living in republics, then we need a constitutional republic. We can't use the New Testament because there are no guiding principles from God in any of the books of the New Testament. So, whether we like it or not, Islam is the religion with the holy book that from which can be derived Quranic and divine principles of governance. And it is very disappointing that Jordan Peterson couldn't bring himself to discuss any of this, and took the usual government position on Israel and Zionism, and took the knee-jerk reaction against Islam and Muslims, well, which is basically the Western imperialist position. Obviously, if you think you are the imperial conqueror of brown people in their shithole countries, you're not going to be adopting their religion. And if all you can do is see politics and history through the lens of conquest, then you're not going to be able to arrive at the divine narrative of why Christianity failed, because of its idolatry compounded with blasphemy. Because according to the Christian narrative, Jesus was tried for blasphemy and executed for it. Jews cannot find any reference in their Talmud to Jesus, and this is actually very strange because Jews, being God's chosen people, or at least the ones who believe they are God's chosen people, do take themselves very seriously and do make a point of writing everything down, and they are supposed to learn from their own history, and they have a history of taking of having a warts and all history of their prophets. So they don't say that any of the prophets of Judaism are are perfect or divine. They will say that, King David had a problem, and so did King Solomon, and so did the rest of them, and there was never any attempt to claim that any of the prophets of Judaism were divine to avoid the mortal sin of idolatry. So my point is that if we don't see human history as a divine narrative of teaching Jews and Gentiles lessons because they ignored the laws of God, then we are not getting the full picture of why things have been happening the way they have been happening. So the problem with Christianity is its idolatry. And if you really did believe in God, then you would be mortified that you have been committing a mortal sin for nearly 2,000 years. That is, if you take God's and the afterlife seriously, which a lot of people don't. A lot of people are just cultural Christians, as Jordan Peterson, as the Wikipedia entry of Jordan Peterson was saying. He came from a mildly Christian household, and this means he is a cultural Christian, and all that he has said afterwards confirms the fact that he is, in fact, an atheist who occasionally stops to wonder what would happen to him if God exists, which explains what he said about, let me quote what he said again. He said, I think the proper response to the question of whether he believes in God is no, and then he continues, but I'm afraid he might exist. So in both these sentences, he contradicts himself. Let me read it again. It's actually quite interesting how much confusion is caused by just this short paragraph. In a 2017 interview, Peterson was asked if he was Christian. He responded, I suppose the most straightforward answer to that is yes. When asked if he believes in God, Peterson responded, I think the proper response to that is no, but I'm afraid he might exist. So he was basically calling himself a cultural Christian. And then the final sentence in that 3-sentence paragraph, in a podcast with Douglas Murray and Jonathan Peugeot, Peterson stated that God is the ultimate fictional character, which is at the top of the hierarchy of attention and action. So Peterson thinks God is fictional. And this ultimately explains everything about him. His prevarication, his inability to, defend his positions as a matter of principle. He never makes up his mind. I don't know if he has now. I hope for his sake that he has. He's had enough time to think about it. I mean, I deal with it by saying I am agnostic, but I am certain that religion has social, political, and spiritual uses. What's wrong with that? It's obvious, isn't it? It's obvious that religion is useful, or else nobody would have it. Even though it's, even though sometimes it looks like religion is more trouble than it's worth because of the conflicts and disagreements that is caused by people talking about it. But then it is because religion and politics are controversial matters to discuss because we all have our own opinion, and because we all have our own opinion, we often disagree with each other. But I hope for Jordan Peterson's sake that he will have resolved these issues by now, since, as I understand it, he has been ill, and I guess if you're ill in bed, you have plenty of time to think about these things.